All right, welcome to Life Extension Live. I'm Dr. Mike, and that is
Dr. Crystal.
So, Dr. Crystal, come on. We all know people are very concerned about mold exposure today, right?
We are, especially us in South Florida. We are
We have to worry about it a
concerned
lot
about
down
it,
here.
and you hear the stories, especially with hurricanes and the rainy season and the flooding, and you just always want to make sure your home is mold free.
Right. But you know, whether you're in South Florida or not, people are concerned about it. You know, the molds are in our environment, they're in our homes, and so we decided to bring an expert on. Right? Why
That's
not?
Right.
We have Dr. Dennis Hooper. He's a retired Navy captain who served with the Medical Corps for 26 years. He's a pathologist and microbiologist interested in infectious diseases, especially fungus and fungal toxins. Dr. Hooper, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you inviting me to talk with your viewers and you.
So listen, we always like to give our viewers a little bit of a background of our guests. So tell us a little bit about how you became interested in this topic of mold and mycotoxins.
Okay. I was trained in a Ph.D. program in microbiology where we study fungus and viruses and bacteria. And then I went on to the U.S. Navy and learned pathology. They trained me in pathology, and I stayed in the Navy afterwards for 26 years to perform not only pathology but microbiology. I became more interested in infectious disease as I followed the organisms going through the laboratory, and thus now have been very interested in the toxins that they produce. The organisms can cause a lot of problems in immunocompromised patients, such as cancer patients or autoimmunity, but the toxins they produce are causing problems. So that led me to follow them very well. And I retired in 2001 from the Navy. 2004, I started a company in Dallas called Real Time Lab, and have been dedicated to the studies of these toxins and what fluids they are in the human body, and then how they relate to the house or the building where they become contaminated. So we invented tests that looked at the toxins in human fluids and related them to the toxins in the house and also the fungi in the house. So I've been working on that for the last 21 years now.
And speaking of those toxins, Dr. Mike earlier mentioned mycotoxins.
Yes.
Can you just elaborate on the mycotoxins? Is that a broad name or is that a specific type of toxin? And just kind of tell us more about those mycotoxins.
Okay. When we study fungus, we don't call it fungology. We call it mycology, M-Y-C-O-ology. And that is because fungi are called myco, or the study of fungi is mycology, and the toxins they produce are called mycotoxins. So it's not we don't have a big brain, or we're not rocket scientists to call them mycotoxins. They're toxins that come from the fungi. And they can produce many different toxins, and the sole purpose of making them is to kill other fungi. So if an aspergillus, which is an organism, can make toxins, it will try and kill everything else around it, bacteria, everything, so it has a source for food. So they don't have brains, but they do have toxins. And as I tell people who I consult with, you are smarter than the fungi, and you can get rid of these toxins, and you have to realize they're just making them for one reason, and that's to kill other fungi, and you just got in the way.
Right. And so a lot of patients actually then who have mycotoxins and maybe some signs and symptoms of that, they're getting this from their environment, right? So where are those common sources that people are getting exposed to these toxins?
There's two avenues of belief of where these mycotoxins come from. There's the food sources, and there's huge industry, especially out of Europe, that studies the mycotoxin area coming from foods. And then there is the environmental group that believes that all of these come from the environment. I believe they come from both. And we have to ascertain where are they coming from in this human. So what I did when I invented these tests is I looked which ones would definitely come from environment and which ones would come from foods. The major one I have to emphasize to the patients, to the docs, and to you guys and your reader or your viewers is that the trichothecenes, the macrocyclic trichothecenes that we look for, are only from the environment. There have been no peer-reviewed papers to show that macrocyclic trichothecenes come from food. So that's what differentiates the tests that Real-Time Lab does from anybody else, that one toxin. And there have never been any tests or anything that can ascertain that this is coming from anything but the environment. So when we do our test, we look for the trichothecenes, and if they're there, we say you're getting them from the environment. Stachybotrys is the major black/green mold that produces the macrocyclic trichothecenes. Does that answer that?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So that the trichothecenes are basically specific to the environment, is what we're saying. So when you find that in somebody, you can say that's environmental.
Right. Now, there are 4 groups of trichothecenes. The simple, which is A, B, C, and then there's D, the macrocyclics. If you find the A, B, or C, you can say this is from food. If you find it from D, the macrocyclics, always environment.
Always from the environment. Gotcha.
Okay. All right. So just to take a step back, just to make sure, I want to make sure our viewers are following what we're talking about. So we're talking about mold exposure. The molds are producing toxins. The purpose of those toxins are to kill other, I guess other types of mold. We're calling those toxins mycotoxins. That's the broad name of the mycotoxins. So now we're getting down to the level of the specific types of mycotoxins, and in particular, we have the kinds that come from different types of mold. So he mentioned the black mold. You're mentioning that, and so I'm curious. And we're saying that really what we're seeing is these particularly harmful types of or class of mycotoxins is coming from the environment. We are not seeing in humans that is coming from our food, is coming from the environment. So now I guess the next question is, where in the environment are we seeing these?
Like, what's the source?
What's the source? And is this in our homes?
Yeah,
that's correct. The way that we find out that it's in our homes is, first of all, the patient comes to the physician and says, I just feel terrible. I have aches and pains. I have forgetfulness. They call it brain fog. They have a whole plethora of symptoms that CDC lists as a possible symptom list. And these patients have gone to many, many physicians, and they say, we don't know what's wrong with us. The doctor doesn't either. And they said, we heard about this test that can look for toxins in urine. Can you order it for us? And they do. And when we find them, they consult with either the doctor, who then consults with us, or the patient directly consults with us. And when we find out that they have been living in a house that has been water damaged, either through a hurricane, a water leak, a tornado, whatever, then they have to go back and look and see where that source is. And that's what we want to look for, is the source of the fungus that is producing these toxins that we find in the urine.
So that means in your home, you would need to swab, I guess, certain areas, your AC units, anywhere where there's maybe potential water leaks. Is that what you would swab those places and then send it off to your lab?
Yes. In the short summary, yes. But we want to know more detail. Where is this leak? Because if you swab dust on your cupboards or on your floor, there's many places that say use a Swifter and send that Swifter in to us. Real-time doesn't do that, but I'll explain that later. But so you have a cotton swab and you just swipe areas that are dusty. Well, you can hopefully find organisms in that, and they do. They've done this for years in air traps and spore traps. But when you do that test, you may miss the mycotoxins, because the only place up until recently, Real-Time Lab was the only one that was looking at these areas for the toxins of the mold. And we've looked at air exchange filters from the furnaces. We've looked at the swabs from air conditioner vents. We look at if you recall, when you look up at your air conditioner return, or where they're sucking in the air, there's a lot of dust there. So you can swab those, but you're not going to find some of the organisms, because there's organisms that love water. They have to have water, and and even if it's humid, they don't like that as much as if there's a water leak.
So what are you finding when you're swabbing them if you're not able to kind of pick up on the mycotoxins?
We find in the swabs, you can find organisms like Aspergillus, Penicillium.
Okay.
But you cannot find some of the ones that produce the trichothecenes. And the reason is because they're very sticky, they're very heavy, and they don't float in air. They stick on the back side of drywall, and they grow because they like gypsum and they like plaster of Paris, and it's warm. And when water hits plaster of Paris or gypsum, it gets warm and the organism loves it. If you recall when you were a kid, that which in my case was a long time ago, but you make plaster of Paris and you pour it into a paper plate.
Yes.
And then you put your hand in it. And it feels nice and warm. Yeah. And you pull it out, and there's your handprint for your mommy. Yeah. And you hand it to her for Mother's Day. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. But it was warm. Well, the fungus loves that.
Loves the warm. Yeah.
That warm plaster of Paris. Now, if you take that same fungus and put on the surface in a painted room, it won't grow. They hate paint. So they grow on the back side of the dryer.
Interesting. Yeah.
And
so
go ahead.
No. So what I'm thinking, so I can recall when I was a new mom, I had my home, the air quality tested. So what I'm hearing is that those tests probably aren't picking up the mycotoxins.
Oh, they don't.
When you're testing your air quality, or when you have mold remediation specialists coming in, they're kind of looking for like maybe the black mold. But those tests, it sounds like may be inadequate. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's very true, and that's where our stand is in my group. Is we're saying that the test you're doing on air quality is just what you're saying. It's the quality of your air shows how many spores of fungi you have in your air. But the fungi don't cause you a problem unless you're a cancer patient or you're a asthmatic or something where you're breathing them in and they cause airway. It's the toxins that are floating on little bitty air dust particles that you breathe in, and these toxins are coming from behind the drywall. They're so small they can come through, and there's peer-reviewed papers on this. They can come through the electrical circuits where you plug in your plugs, and they've shown that they find those toxins coming from behind. Yeah, people go, ah!
Yeah, I've never heard that before. It's like, geez.
So what do we have to now cut a hole in our drywall?
Like,
what
do we do?
So now you're worried. No.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're a patient, you have a problem, and you're going to now call Ghostbusters, so to speak, or Fungus Busters. That's us. And we tell you, get a mold inspector that can look for water leaks in your house. Well, we don't want to have our whole wall torn up in holes looking for these fungi. No, the easiest way is to go get a thermal camera or a heat-seeking camera.
Yeah.
And there's many places leaks, yeah. Rent them or you can buy them. They're not super expensive. And then you look where the pipes are in your wall. And if you know where the pipes are, or you just take pictures everywhere of your wall, and you can see heat. Heat is generated just like when you put your hand in that gypsum plate for your mom with plaster of Paris. The water and the plaster of Paris on the drywall mix and they cause heat. That's where you can find the especially Stachybotrys and Aspergillus. Yeah. And they're very, very telltale. And when I tell the patients, they say, but our inspector came and said there's no fungi. And they can't see anything. No, you're never going to see it if you don't tear up the drywall. But you can do that by looking at a heat-seeking camera. And once you find that, that's where you drill the hole and you look for the fungus there. And if you find it, you usually find it in just sheets. It's growing just like a lawn. So you have to cut out that whole piece of drywall where that.
You're going to do this, aren't you, Dr. Crystal?
I am.
Dr. Crystal does everything.
I already have a place in mind. I have a spot that I suspect there could be problems, but we'll confirm it with one of the heat identifying gadgets.
And if you do, you need to report it to me, because I tell patients, call me back, and they'll, man, you were right. There, it was right there. And they were having these tens of thousands of dollars of bids to come in and just tear up their whole house looking for this.
It is not necessary.
Yeah.
No, it is not.
But I think I want to go back to those symptoms.
Oh yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that.
That you mentioned. It's the mystery symptoms, Dr. Mike. We're back to that, trying to figure out the root cause.
Yeah.
And I know we specifically wanted to kind of talk about some of the cognitive dysfunction or the neurological symptoms. And so can you tell us, with your patients, what type of symptoms have you seen? What are they saying that makes you think, this probably...
sounds like the mycotoxin.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to clarify that I don't see patients.
Okay.
I'm a pathologist, so the people who want to see me are already dead for autopsy. But I'm interested in clinical pathology, which is the study of all these different fluids that come out of us, as well as the microorganisms that cause us problems. And then I consult with either the doctors or the patients and tell them how to interpret this and what to do next. So your question is, well, what are the symptoms neurologically? Well, the patients call me and the doctors and say, this patient has had a history, a diagnosis of Lyme disease. And my first question to them is, if you diagnose Lyme disease, how many on your Western blot DNA test how many lines are there? And by CDC, you have to have anywhere between 5 and 8 lines to diagnose this test. The patients more or less have 4. So it's a presumptive Lyme disease, and these docs give antibiotics for that, and they don't get better. There are patients who have been seeing doctors for years because I have forgetfulness or brain fog, or I have skin problems and it's itchy, and I have little bumps all over, or I have bleeding disorders, and they can't find anything. All your blood tests are normal. Your liver enzymes are normal. Your kidney functions are normal. So they, up until recently, they've always said, you have Lyme disease, take this antibiotic. Well, they didn't get better. So then they heard of mycotoxin testing. And so they would do that, and we'd find mycotoxins. And we'd say, what's your symptoms? And they have brain fog. That's the number one thing that they really are very concerned about. I can't figure out what's wrong. Well, what is brain fog? Brain fog is encephalopathy. And encephalopathy means when you get some kind of toxin in your system, your liver is supposed to get rid of them through your intestinal tract. But if you have a bad liver or you have too many toxins, you can't excrete them. And when you do that, when you can't get rid of them, the toxins increase in your system, and you get confused and you get encephalopathy. And that's what I have personal experience with, that because I have an autoimmune disease, and I got a liver issue where I couldn't take any of the toxins. Even if you don't have mold toxins, you have other toxins that you're always getting rid of. And if your liver goes bad, and if you get too many toxins, you can't get rid of them fast enough. So they mount and they go to different organs. And one of the biggest areas for telltale is the brain.
Yeah.
And so you can't get rid of them. So you become confused and you become encephalopic. And they have to either give you a lot of fluids, or they give you something called glutathione to get rid of them. And you're usually admitted to the hospital. In my condition, you were admitted to the hospital. A lot of people are just put off to say, oh, you don't have any problem. You're just getting old. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Or maybe here's your antidepressant. That's all I'm going to go to as well.
You're referred many, I'd say 90% of the time, to a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Let's so the testing that you developed, Life Extension, has a couple of those tests. So we have, let me make sure I'm getting this right, Dr. Chris. So we have a body mold and mycotoxin test and a home mold and mycotoxin test. And then we've combined them into one. If you're interested in that, you can check it out at lifeextension.com/mold. Tell us a little bit about these tests. What's the process? How long does it take to get the results? That kind of stuff.
Okay. First of all, for years we studied which organ system, which fluid would be the best one to pick. And so we looked at blood, because everybody draws blood. And we found that we couldn't find the toxins in the blood because there are cells that pick them up and deliver them to end organs right away. So we decided, well, we're going to look at urine, which is the next one. You always go in for a UA and a CBC. So we looked at the urine, and lo and behold, we found them. And when we reviewed the literature in the 1980s and 90s, they were looking at these in animals. The veterinarian area was very, very strong in mycotoxins in horses, dogs, all these animals. And so that's what we decided to do, is look at the urine, and lo and behold, we found them. So we started doing what clinical laboratories are required to do, is validations. So if we knew we put so much trichothecene in a tube, we needed to detect that much. And then we'd have to dilute it to see what was our lowest level of detection. And that's how we set our standards and our controls for all the toxins we test for. So in summary, we need a urine sample, and it can be any time of the day, because you're going to excrete you don't excrete them just because there's a certain time of the day and your bladder says, or your kidney says, I'm going to do it then. So no, you can do it any time.
Yeah.
And when you do it any time, then we can find them. And what we do is we put them we dilute them, and then we put them in a test called an ELISA test. The ELISA test is similar to what is done with hepatitis and HIV testing. I mean, it wasn't a genius I wasn't a genius who thought of ELISA, but I did think of the ELISA using mycotoxins. So we then report them out. We have a level of detection of each one of these, and we can say you're positive or negative, and that's it.
Okay, and it's a urine. So this is a urine test that they can do at home, and then they send that in. Is that kind of how it works, or?
Yeah, they collect it at home,
right?
And they can. The doctor in the past has had to order these tests. However, recently we have doctors in every state now that can order the test. It's called direct-to-consumer testing. Right. So the patient can actually order them. Now, when they get those results, they can say, oh, what do I do? And if they know they have a mold or mycotoxin contamination in their house, they can order something called our EMMA, EMMA, Environmental Mold and Mycotoxin Assay. And we direct them where to look for these samples.
And in the home now. Yeah.
In the home. And if they do that and send that in, we compare the results. And if we find that they have aflatoxin, for example, and they have aflatoxin in their urine, where else can they be getting it?
Right.
Yeah. So you make that connection.
That's what we do. And then we say, go and look in your house where this is contaminated.
Right. It's fascinating information, right?
I think so. I mean, it's just really, it's the root cause. It makes perfect sense. And I like how you said, well, you do the urine test. We see that you're positive, and now you do your home, or you could just do them both.
Or do both at the same time. I get that's why. Well, that Life Extension does offer a combo, so it's a little bit cheaper that way. Hey, Dr. Hooper, this was fascinating information. We could go on and on and on. We may have to have you come on another time to kind of complete the conversation.
One of the things I do want to emphasize is the neurologic issues, because these patients, that's the major issue that they have. And when you look at MRIs or CAT scans of these patients, they have the same results as a person who was damaged in a car accident or in PTSD. And so they look like a stroke victim on an MRI. And when they are so confused, they don't know what to do. Well, some of the things I've been looking at is how do they take care of stroke victims? They retrain. You go into physical therapy and you retrain them how to talk, walk, hear, whatever it is that is a problem. Same thing with cognition. If you can take a patient and retrain that area that was damaged by the toxin to go around those neurologic areas that are problematic and pick up on the other side or even go through that damaged area, you can retrain the brain to not be so.
Yeah.
And that's what I would like to talk about next if you ever want to have another session.
Absolutely. I think that's a no-brainer for us. But today, just I think was a great introduction to the mycotoxins, how to test for them. Dr. Hooper, if somebody wants to learn more about what you're doing, your real-time lab, how can they locate you?
Yeah, you can go to our website at realtimelab.com. And then I also act as an expert witness on legal cases. So you can go to my other website called M as in Mary, S as in Sam, C as in Charlie, expert.com. We have papers, we have webinars on both sites that can teach you about all these toxins and about the organisms, and we have legal cases that have been agreed upon and either settled or have gone to trial and a verdict. So it's very it's fascinating to study this stuff.
That's really cool. Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on, and thank you for coming on today. We really appreciate it. And don't forget, if you're listening and you're interested in those tests, go to lifeextension.com/mold. And you can look at both the body and the home mycotoxin test. Again, fascinating information, Dr. Crystal. What a great show. I learned a lot.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a little, I don't want to say scary, but it's hopeful. I like to take the positive side because there are so many people who are dealing with neurological issues, cognitive issues, the brain fog. You keep hearing about that. And this is just another piece of the puzzle.
If you've been bounced around from doctor to doctor to doctor, no one knows what's going on, and now they want to give you an antidepressant, or they thought it was Lyme and now it's not. If you're in that mess, it's just something to consider.
Right.
It's something else. Okay, maybe I need to look at toxins in my home. So thanks for joining us today. Don't forget, we go live every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. Whatever channel you watch us on, make sure you hit interested or subscribe or follow, whatever it is, so you always know we're going live. And don't forget to comment, like, and give us a nice review.
Yeah, and questions.
And ask questions. We love to hear from you. So that's every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern time. I'm Dr. Mike.
Dr. Crystal.
We'll see you next time.